Randy Simms, thanks for joining us.
A pleasure to be here, sir.
VOCM's Open Line program with Randy Simms has the deserved title being number one in its market. In terms of cumulative audience, all the people listening to it between 9 and 11:30, it's not just number one, but it's number one by a long shot. Its nearest competitor is only 1/3, or your audience is 3 times the size of your nearest competitor.
We're delighted with that, by the way. We're very pleased.
What explains the success?
Well, there's a long history. I would like to think, that I could claim some credit for its huge success. I can't. I think the biggest thing I can say about my time as host of this program is that the most popular program in the province, certainly from a radio perspective, was handed over to me, and I have successfully not destroyed it. I think that's about as far as I can go.
Well, you've grown the audience.
The audience has grown a little, no doubt about that, but it's been huge for years and years and years. Some of that may go back to a cultural reality of how Newfoundland as a province came to be, about the impact radio had on all of the isolated communities that existed around this island in particular when you get into the 1930s, 1940s. Our oral culture, which is very significant here, the way we tell stories and the way we keep them and grow them. It may be all of that made talk radio so attractive to people in this province and their willingness to participate. But we're not nearly as unique as some people think. Pretty well every major market has a major talker, as it's called in the industry. And in our case, we're the major talker. And we're quite proud of the numbers and proud of what we do.
I'm interested in how you do it in a couple of ways. One is you do this live.
Yes.
It's kind of like being on the high wire without a net.
Sometimes, and sometimes you fall too, Roger. Sometimes you fall off that high wire and you get yourself in hot water, and that But that's part of what makes, I think, the program intriguing, is the fact that can happen to you. There have been constant debates, not only within the audience about how the program should work, but also here within VOCM, within the management. What style of program? What is the role of a host on a talk radio show? An awful lot of people seem to think, well, you're supposed to be a moderator, so you're doing the debate. You're like the Speaker of the House. Well, of course, I've never agreed to that, or I've never considered the role that. I've always considered the role to be a little bit of a provocateur. You try and entice people to engage in debate. You want to open up people's minds and hearts, and sometimes you want passion on the radio. You want to hear people call you up, sometimes just to chew you out. You'll say things on occasion when you're the host of a program like this that you're going to tick somebody off. But it also opens up the floodgates and allows for a tremendous amount of talk and great information, and hopefully great entertainment. And we can never forget that at the end of the day, if we don't entertain, well, that audience is not going to be there.
Some people, when they turn on that microphone, think about talking just to one person. Others have a different approach. What's your approach when the light goes on and you're on?
Well, when I first started doing this, and I did a few of these shows over the years, and then I basically stayed in the broadcast business but got out of radio. And I ended up running a charitable foundation on behalf of the corporation, and I did that for about 14 years. When I got back into radio, this was where I ended up doing a talk show, not by design, almost by happenstance for me. Once I realized that I was going to take on this task and take it on seriously, it wasn't just going to be something I did one day a month or filled in for someone every now and again. This was now going to be my show to do. I really had to find a way to get that kick started every day. The preamble, we call it here in Canada. A guy goes on and does a talk show, and I'll talk for 12 or 15 minutes without interruption. So it's a little speech.
Here's the menu, here's what's in the news,
here's what's on the go and what we're talking about. It's a little 15-minute speech. Here we call it, in Canada certainly, we call it a preamble. This is the preamble to the show that's about to begin. In the United States, in talk radio, it's called the stir. right? That's a very interesting thing that they refer to it as that. They're a little more honest about it than we are, I think, because that's what it is. You're stirring the pot. You're bringing up issues, you're bringing up events, and you're gonna challenge some thoughts. You're gonna tilt at some windmills, and others you're gonna try and kick down. So, all of that is part and parcel of how you go about doing it. For me, everybody tells you public speaking is, the greatest fear for adults. More fear than death, more fear than being sick. Telling a group of adults or an individual, you got to stand up before that microphone and talk to all of those people. The greatest human fear, apparently, public speaking. For me, I always start every program as a result. The image I conjure is that I'm at the Arts and Culture Center in downtown St. John's with 1,022 seats, by the way. That's what's in the Arts and Culture Center. 1,022 seats, and every one of them is full. And when that jingle runs in the morning and that sound goes out there to say the program is beginning, and it's bop, ba-dop, bop, bop. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is. I conjure a picture of me in the wings, waiting to walk out on the center stage, just me and the microphone, and I'm talking to that 1,000 people, which is why I generally do my preamble standing up. I'm generally not like we're here now sitting down. Even though this is the seat I generally sit in when I do, I'm generally stood. That's how I get started, and that's what keeps it going every day.
I'm interested in the journey that has brought you to that spot, standing in front of those 1,022 seats, full seats.
Oh, they got to be full, or it's a bad image.
Tell us about your childhood, your family, where you're from.
Oh my, I'm the last of 9. I'm the last of 9, but I'm really the second of 2. It's pretty interesting. My mother and father had 7 children. And then they moved from Badger, Newfoundland, back in the 1940s to the airport town of Gander, just as it was starting.
Badger was a logging community.
Badger was a logging community, and my father was a logger. He left that and went to Gander for better times. And they moved to Gander with their 7 children. And after they got in Gander, when the town site was built back in the late 1940s, early 1950s, well, they had a couple of more kids. That's kind of what happened. So there ended up being 9 of us, and I'm the baby of the 9, if you can imagine. 7 boys, 2 girls. And I grew up for my first 8 years of life in Gander. And then we moved a little outside of Gander for economic reasons, cheaper house, move. And we went to Appleton on the banks of the Gander River, the greatest recreation center on earth. God gave us for free, Gander Lake and Gander River. And those of us who grew up there, anybody who knows it would appreciate what I just said. And my brother Dennis and I grew up in that house, but all of our brothers and sisters were all grown up and gone. So while I'm the last of 9, I'm really one of 2, and my brother Dennis and I think as a result of that, we're pretty close to this day.
So where did your enthusiasm or interest in or aptitude for radio?
Hard to say. I was growing up, like so many teenagers are. I was bouncing from corner to corner and wall to wall, not really knowing what I was going to do, not really knowing what I wanted to do, preoccupied with everything but what I should be doing.
Did you have television in your household when you were a child, by the way?
1959, Halloween night 1959, we got our first television, and that was in Gander.
So your source of entertainment would have been radio. You grew up in the age of radio.
I grew up in both, really. In 1959, I was only like 5 years old, 6 years old. And the reason why I know it was Halloween night, it made such an impact to have come home from my trick-or-treating event, and there was a TV in the living room with the wires, and my dad was up on the roof doing this thing with a neighbor, and eventually they got a picture and whatnot, and the first thing I saw was Casper the Ghost, and the next thing I saw was the late Bob Lewis. And I was fascinated with television, But yes, I always had a rocket radio when I was growing up. I always listened to the radio when I was growing up. It was always a part of my life. Yeah.
I took you away from your story.
Right.
So
Anyway,
you're a young man, you're kind of footloose.
I was kind of footloose and getting in trouble every now and again, having problems every now and again in school. I was, one of the, I won't say one of the bad boys, but certainly not one of the good guys. I wasn't a part of the group that excelled in school or anything like that. But I encountered some tremendous teachers in my life, and one of them was a fellow named Ed Smith. He's a writer today, writes The View from Here. And he was the vice principal of my high school. And I think he looked at me and saw a kid who had skills and ability and didn't know how to find a channel for it. And he started working with me a little bit, and I ended up doing stuff on stage at school. I ended up being president of the debating club, and we used to do a show called Collegiate Capers, and I used to always be the host of it, and we did all this stuff in high school. So I was pretty comfortable being out in front and behind the microphone. And one day he called me into the office and he said, you're coming with me. I don't think you could do it in the school system today. Get in my car. I'm a kid. Get in my car. You're coming with me. And I piled in the car with him because I think I'm in deep doggy-doo. I've done something, or I know I've done lots, but I got caught. It was like that. And he took me up to CBG in Gander, to the radio station there. And I did a voice test for them and read some scripts and did some things for them. And then they sent it off to Ottawa, to the English department at the CBC in Ottawa. And about 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, this report came back, and he got it. Brought me to his office, and they said, basically this guy has a talent. He could be a good announcer. And he said, why don't you try radio to be an announcer? And look out. That's where it started. And from there, it was a Johnson shoe bottle that became my microphone. Johnson shoe polish bottle, white polish, belonged to my mother's shoes, I think. That, the newspaper, and anything else I could read aloud. And I started doing that all over the house, everywhere, in the mirrors. And
So you would have been like 16?
I was like 16, 17 at the time. And that's where I guess the desire to do it came from.
So a teacher spotted the talent.
A teacher spotted the talent, and I owe him to this day. And many, many, many years later, after I had left high school for long ago, and I'd been a broadcaster in television for years, there was a golf tournament. I'm also an avid golfer, Roger. There was a golf tournament, and the guest speaker was going to be Ed Smith. And I'm talking like 25 years after I'd left high school. And there was going to be a dinner at the end of the golf tournament, and he was going to be the guest speaker, and I wanted to go. So I said to my wife, who had never met him or knew anything about him, we're going to this tournament. And we went to the tournament. I played in the tournament. We go to the dinner. At the end of the dinner, if you want, you can go up and say hello and meet Ed Smith, sign for one of his books. And I went up. And he's a tall, tall man, as you know. Ed Smith's 6'3", and I'm, 5'5", and stuck out my hand and said, Mr. Smith, do you remember me? And he said, yes, Randy, I've been following your career since you left high school, and I think you're old enough now to call me Ed. I've never forgotten it. He was a wonderful educator, and to this day still educates with his writing.
Would have been a small school, correct?
Gander Collegiate, no. I went to, I'm probably one of the last generation of Newfoundlanders, though, because I was born Canadian, born in 1954 after the Revolution. And so I was born Canadian, but I actually did spend, when we moved to Appleton and I was like 7, 8 years old, I spent 4 years in a 2-room school. After that, I went back to Gander on a school bus every morning and went to a large school, went to Gander Academy, and then went to Gander Collegiate, which had 400 or 500 kids. And yeah, so no, I had a pretty, I'll say, well-rounded educational opportunity that existed at the time. Not that I did as well with it as I should have.
So after high school, I presume you go to work?
After high school, I went to work. I graduated from high school, and I was valedictorian of my high school graduating class, which was a tremendous honor at that time. Went to work for Sobeys in Gander. My brother Les was a butcher at the co-op in Gander, and a really good one. And so the manager of the Sobeys store, I worked there part-time in the summer. He needed someone, and they hired me as a trainee butcher. He kind of figured, well, if your brother Les is a good butcher, maybe you've got talent to be a good butcher. And I started training to be a butcher, and it never lasted very long. When my brother Eugene, another brother, came home from Labrador City and said, Randy, they're looking for an announcer. at CFLW in Labrador in Wabush. And I got a manpower exploratory grant, it's called. 84 bucks. 74 bucks for the ticket, return in those days, and 10 bucks for cab rides to go and actually audition at the radio station. And if I didn't get the job, I had to come back home on Sunday. So I ended up flying to Wabush, did an interview.
And then discovered how lucrative working in radio was.
Yes, realized then I would be in poverty for the rest of my life. Went on the air that Sunday night, and to some degree, I suppose you could say, like all radio announcers, you know, it all started at a 1,000 watt radio station somewhere in the bush. For me, it was Wabush, Labrador.
So what have you learned along the way that contributes to the success you're having now?
Oh my, what have I learned in my 55 or so years, or 58 years now of walking this planet that applies to what I do for a living? I'd have to say lots and maybe sometimes nothing. I think sometimes it's really intriguing and important that you approach these things that I do, especially when you're talking to people every day with no prior knowledge or no suggestions, no you're king of the hill. You can't be the community oracle in this role, despite sometimes your desire to be, you know. So I'm not sure that I can say what I've learned. I realized early on in the broadcast business that a high school education wasn't enough. I needed more, and went on to do some more as a result of that. I realized through broadcasting and news and journalism that I had a small modicum of talent for writing, not very much, but small. It's the piece that breaks my heart, and the piece that challenges me the most isn't what I say into a microphone, but what I put on paper. I've learned all that, you know, that kind of thing is what you learn. And a recognition as well that if you're going to go, a camera will pick up dishonesty. It will. Microphones do it too. People know when you're not being honest. And so when you're doing a program like I do, there's a certain need to be honest. You can't lie very much and get away with it. You know, those are, I don't know whether that answers your question about Roger.
Yeah, it does. I want to ask you about this place, Newfoundland, that you know so intimately. The oral culture that you talked about, the place that radio occupied in a colony where people were spread out all over it. Has the place changed that in a way that you can hear it on the air?
Oh, dramatically. Oh yeah, no question the place has changed, and it's changed significantly. And you know, everybody will go back, if they go back in history. I mean, what stands out in Newfoundland history is obviously the Battle for Confederation. So everyone will argue. I just finished Peter Cashin's memoirs, just read them the other day. It's very interesting because he was the guy on the losing side, and usually the victor gets to write history, is how it works, you know. He was the guy on the losing side of the battle for Newfoundland back in the 1940s, 47, 48, 49. The reality of it is, which Joey appreciated, but I'm not sure that Peter did, is that Joey won because of radio. Joey won because of the power of the broadcast medium in its infancy and his innate ability to use it successfully. You know, that's why we can argue about how, you know, the Brits planned it, the Canadians supported it, they financed it. Joey was a pawn in their hands. You could do all that. They rigged the vote. You could do what you want. The reality of it is that the hearts and minds of Newfoundlanders who agreed to give up their right to govern themselves, to become a province of Canada, to do it based on, by the way, a sense of nationalism, which is intriguing in our history. Radio did that. That's what created that. So since then, radio is still playing a huge role in what we do in our lives, which is why I think numbers for shows like ours in this province are maybe significantly higher than they are in other markets. So like I said, there's a big talker in every market. Maybe ours are higher because of some of that history. Has the place changed? Oh my God, look around. You know, just look around. It's dramatic. The image of Newfoundland, the outport Newfoundland, the rural Newfoundland. I remember participating at Memorial a couple of years ago with Peter Fenwick and Reg Anstey with the Federation of Labor, names that won't mean much to audiences outside Newfoundland, Roger, but will mean a lot here. We participated in a debate on rural Newfoundland, saving rural Newfoundland. Well, the argument we had, and part of my argument was, okay, what are we saving? Because first you've got to define what it is. Well, rural Newfoundland one time very much was the little flat-bottomed dory boat in the bay. The guy that went out, caught his little bit of fish in the morning, came back, spent some time in the garden in the afternoon, tried to take care of the kids, but, sold his bit of fish at the plant, the inshore fishery piece, the little house on the cliff. That's Newfoundland. We, to some degree, with our tourism piece today, we still sell a little bit of that. The generation of Newfoundlanders that my son represents at the age of 38, he went to college in Welland, Ontario. Think of a Newfoundlander doing this and phoning home to his father, which he did, after being there for about a month and a half, and said, "Dad, what a hick town." And I'm kind of like, "What? Dad, I'm up." He's in Welland, Ontario. He's on the escarpment. He's right there on the Niagara. He's next to Buffalo, New York. Toronto is 30 minutes away. He's in the heart of it all, and he goes, "Dad, what a hick town. They got 2 friggin' theaters. I'm at home and I got 18. Like this is." And I think that generational piece has what's pushed Newfoundlanders to say, we don't want to be Newfies. We don't want that stereotype to necessarily exist for us in our reality. And that gets reflected on the radio all the time. We did a poll here, 70% of Newfoundlanders say, we don't want to be called Newfies anymore.
Viewers in the Maritime provinces might not be aware of Joe Smallwood's place in the history of Newfoundland radio. He didn't just use it, he was
a part of it.
He was a very successful broadcaster in his day.
The Barrelman, the Barrelman shows that he did, yeah, he was a pretty powerful broadcaster in his day.
Don Jameson followed the same kind of path in politics, coming out of broadcasting. And
a lot of broadcasters who knew, well, because that, I guess that bit of fame, if you will, if fame is the right word, or notoriety that you get from being a local broadcaster in Newfoundland and Labrador, lends itself to other opportunities. People like Smallwood and people like Don Jameson actually took advantage of that in some pretty creative and positive ways. It's interesting. Jameson said we should be American. We should have become a state, not a Canadian province. He ended up a very powerful cabinet minister in the Canadian government.
You find yourself in exactly that same role, either blessed or cursed. You're a very high public profile, and you've been in politics for a long time. Mayor of Mount Pearl, people on the Maritimes. It's the sister city of St. John's.
It's the second largest municipality in the province, at least for the moment. I think we're being outgrown by Conception Bay South, and they're going to take it over, at least in population numbers. But yeah, I've served on municipal council for the last 24 years, and I've served the last 6 years as mayor.
Active in the Federation of Municipalities.
Yes, I was once president of the Federation of Municipalities. I've had my time in politics. Ran provincially twice. Once for the Liberals, once for the Tories. I've been, I'm down the middle one.
The Rex Murphy political
Yes, and I was tremendously successful at losing at both. Because whatever it is, maybe it's just me. I kept being on the wrong side of the agenda, the wrong side of the track, not with the movement. You can tell when a government's going to shift, when things are going to change, and I'm like the guy on the iceberg says, yeah, the Titanic looks like it'll survive, and I jump on the deck. That's me in politics. Local government, municipal government, yeah, for me, I fell in love with it. I didn't realize at the time I got involved what was actually involved. I was president of our Chamber of Commerce. A couple of business guys insisted I run. I ran to be on the town council at the time, and ran for it. And I thought you're dealing with garbage collection, picking up fixing fences, making sure the streets get plowed, dealing with that. I didn't realize there was a whole body of study out there about urban planning, urban development, economic development. How you go about doing all of that was, for me, I fell in love with it, Roger. The only word I can describe for it is I fell in love with it. And then trying to find a defining concept for what it is you're doing. And I got it one day. It wasn't mine, I stole it. But you got it. You're trying to build a healthy community for people. It's not just about snow clearing. It's about street layout and design. It's about what is it people want in their community? What kind of services can you provide? Can you afford to do it? My God, I'm still at it. So I must love it. I'm still at it.
I was going to say, in the little bit of time we have left, so you're happy. I mean, is there something else that you want, or you got it?
I think pretty well I can say to some degree I got it. I think I would have loved one of those sealskin seats at the Confederation building. I think I would have liked to have been a politician at that level. Probably would have liked Ottawa, simply because of the ferocity of the debate. You know, I think because I love debate, you have to do a job like this one. But overall, yes, I'd have to say I'm happy. I don't know whether I can say, I would say I'm satisfied. There's other things I'd like to do, obviously, both with this program and with other things, social media. I don't have a strong enough website. I don't have a presence there like I should have yet, certainly for the program or for myself. There's a book I want to write someday. There's things I want to do. I don't want to say, hey, I've settled. But I do want to say I'm pretty satisfied. Life has been good to me, and the people of Newfoundland and Labrador keep listening to me every morning. And as long as they're willing to fill those seats at the Arts and Culture Center in my head every day, I'm going to be here every day. Yeah, it's fun.
For a fellow who came from a small community, large family, long journey, you must be enormously pleased about your son's success.
Absolutely.
People in the Maritimes might
not know.
Perhaps he may be the preeminent filmmaker of his generation here in Newfoundland.
I hope that's the case. I don't know that it's true, but I hope that's the case. Going back to something we said at the beginning, it was a series of teachers, and one in particular that found the niche for me, gave me a sense of direction, and I was able to move on and go into what I wanted to do. My son, at 10 years of age, Roger, we would get out of school, pick him up the last day of school, and when everybody were throwing their books and everything away because the school was over, we used to have to go to every drugstore all over the region and buy up every exercise book they had left, because all he wanted to do all summer long was write. From the time he was 10, he wanted to be a filmmaker, and it's kind of you to say he is going to be one of the more preeminent filmmakers of his generation, certainly to come from our province. I hope that is true, not for my sake, because it's great for my ego, but for his sake. This is a dream of his, and his parents allowed him, he says, to pursue it. That's not really true. We couldn't have stopped him if we tried. And yeah, we're very proud of him. He's going to be a huge success on the Canadian stage, as opposed to just a local stage like his dad. Somebody said to me one day, pretty soon someone is not going to look at Justin and say, that's Randy Simms' son. They're going to look at you and say, that's Justin Simms' dad. I can't wait.
A grand journey. Listen, thanks very much for your time. It's a real pleasure to talk with you. And
Roger, Bill, thank you very much for having me. It's a great show, In Conversation. Let's do it again, maybe over a coffee or a drink someday.
You're on. Thanks again.
Thank you.